So I'll tell you what my day's been like. Do you want to know? Do you really want to know? So I live in Australia, and you other countries, when it's hot, you're like, oh, it's hot. Where in Australia, it's hot and wet because it's literally a rainforest. So I've had to wipe out ant colonies all day, and I had to wipe out one about half an hour ago, literally under the couch I'm sitting on. So I have bare feet, and I'm sort of like raised. I have my legs up like a monkey, trying not to step on any dead ants that I've had to cull. And then I had to turn off the aircon because I have to make a video and you'll just hear the so now I'm dying and I'm sweating right through the back of my shirt. Luckily not the front. The front is still clean, but the back is very moist at the moment, so you're getting only the front view today. So it's actually been a while since I've made a video. It doesn't feel like a long time until I look at my channel again and I see 1 month ago, 2 months ago, and I don't realize that. So I figured that I'd start doing the monthly thing that everyone does, which is wrapping up what I've read in a month. I didn't read as much as I wanted to this month. Maybe that'll change in February, but in January, no, I barely read anything. But there's some stuff to talk about, for sure. Alright, in no particular order, we're going to talk about the books. So, here's the first book on my pile. I read Pink Slime by Fernanda Trias. I think this is eligible for the International Book of this year, I don't know. I loved the premise of the book. It's like a city on the sea, or near the sea, and it's some kind of like massive crisis of nature, like an ecological crisis, where there's all this algae and the water's not drinkable and there's a toxic mist. And at the same time it's about a woman and she has some sort of existential crisis in her life. I love the premise. I love the connecting of the two things. I think that's good. It's not subtle, but I like the premise. I like soft sci-fi like that. That's, in terms of dramatic books that get that kind of Booker attention, I like soft sci-fi in that way. Not saying this will get nominated, I don't know. I thought it was a little bit boring. I thought some of the dialogue was quite bad in the In Ascension kind of way. Where people talked like no human on Earth I've ever heard of, and not a fair criticism sometimes, because sometimes books aren't going for that, but there are scenes where characters are meant to be relatable and meant to be talking like people, and I just felt a writer. Again, not an amazing critique, but it was a critique nonetheless. Every chapter begins with like, yeah, it begins with like short, it's like text message writing, and they're like short little poems, and I thought all of those sucked. There wasn't a single one of those that I liked, and I thought that choice was stupid, and didn't add anything. So I'd give it like a 3 out of 5. I don't remember a lot of it because I read it at the beginning of the month, and I forget books immediately after I read them, which is a common thing, I think, on YouTube. The next book I read is The Emperor by Ryszard Kapuscinski. That was not how you pronounce it, I'm sure. So Kapuscinski is an author I've wanted to read for a long time. Now having read him, I describe him as like Svetlana Alexievich light, where Alexievich is very nebulous in her approach to things, which helps her because it means she can address a lot at once, and she's kind of letting things take her where they go. Kapuscinski is incredibly focused. He has this really like laser eye on what he wants to do and his choices of viewpoint and his subjects particularly. And this book is about the Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. Yes, Ethiopia, I've got it, I'm a genius. And it's about him through the perspective of his royal court. I think it's only his royal court. I can't remember if there's any other viewpoints. The first part is just describing his reign, and then the second part, like the last third, is describing the coup that got pitted against him, and I think he got assassinated. I can't remember. It says the cause of death was circulatory failure, but I can't remember if he was assassinated or not. The book is really, really great. It's fucking awesome. It's more about how this man, Haile Selassie, ran his parliament, his court, and all the different new roles he created, and the way people reacted to him is really interesting, and he gets these different viewpoints throughout the book, and he builds this character through it. Again, in the same vein as Svetlana Alexievich, she uses these disparate viewpoints, but what she's looking for is just like something unbelievably broad, like Chernobyl Prayer. It's about Chernobyl, but it's about everybody else, it's about individual lives, and there's just so much happening, whereas this is just about him, people's perspectives of him. And I remember the first point of view in the book is the person whose job it was to clean the piss off men's shoes who are standing at attention while the Emperor's dog walks around, and it's someone's job to follow the dog and clean the piss off the shoes when the dog pisses on them. And perfect opening metaphor, and the book just continues with that. There's all these really weird individual roles that get created. There's these different perspectives on him. There's some people who love him, and it's really, really interesting. It's a very interesting short book that I'd recommend to literally anyone. And yeah, I thought it was fantastic, and I will read it again, definitely. So yeah, big recommendation on that. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It might go up to a 5. But yeah, loved it. That was a great book. Next one we have, what else do we have here? Let's go with this one. Next one I read was Heat and Dust by Ruth Jabvala. I keep calling her Ruth Bader Ginsburg when I talk about her and I'm not thinking. So yeah, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's Heat and Dust, winner of the Booker Prize in the 70s, I think. This book is the exact same premise and structure as The House of Doors, which was on the Booker long list last year. And having read this, I like The House of Doors less now, because this book said exactly what The House of Doors said in half the time. It was more interesting, it was more subtle, and I now just hate The House of Doors, honestly, whereas this book I enjoyed, for the most part. This book is about a woman who travels to India to, I think it's her great-grandmother, to understand the story of her great-grandmother who had an affair with an Indian royal and had his child. And I thought the half of the book that was on the present day with the woman going around India was absolutely fantastic. I thought all of that was just amazing, and then every time it cut back, because it cuts back to the great-grandmother, Olivia, and her affair with the Indian prince, I was yawning and I wanted to go to bed, and I wish that the book literally didn't do that. If the book didn't cut back to Olivia and it was about the woman in the present day actually finding out that story sort of manually, instead of reading the diary, I thought that that would make the book infinitely better, because the modern day viewpoint is significantly more engaging. It has more of a like a wistfulness to it. It's just more interesting. The characters in the modern day are more layered. And then when you flash back to the House of Doors segment, where it's this woman who wants to break free and she has an affair with an Indian man, I thought that was supremely boring. And from page 5 onwards, you don't even need to know. You know exactly how it's gonna go. It doesn't develop on that. It's like, it's really obvious what it's going to do, and it doesn't change from the obvious picture I have in my head of what it's going to do. So yeah, I love half of this book, so I give it a 3 out of 5. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I love her adaptations. I love her Merchant Ivory works. I love the Remains of the Day movie, and that was her screenplay. So she's a great writer, she's a fantastic writer. I love that she got the Booker as well, that's great. Yeah, I can see a lot of people I know really liking this book, but about half of it did it for me. And the next book I read was Master Georgie by Beryl B. Bainbridge. Beryl Bainbridge was the perennial Booker loser. She never won the Booker Prize. She was nominated like 7 or 8 times, and she never won. And that book is the one that I think people consider she should have won for, Master Georgie. It's about this... I described it when I was on Nathan's YouTube channel. Shout out to my boy Nathan. I described it as follows the adventures of a Saltburn-esque Felix character, Jacob Elordi character, and the sort of merry band of people that he forms around himself who all love him and all fuck him and they all love him and think he can do no wrong. And it goes from London to the Crimean War, and it's very interestingly structured, but I found it very really heady, and I actually did not understand the book. So each chapter is kind of structured around a photographic moment. So a moment that happens that someone takes a picture of, hypothetically. So someone, like just a moment, like a picture-perfect frame of something happening, like an action in motion. And that's what each chapter leads up to. And I thought that structure was very, very interesting, but I found it really dense and difficult to read in the same way that I find Penelope Fitzgerald really hard to read, where I've tried to read Offshore and The Blue Flower both twice, and I haven't been able to get very far because I find them really dense. I find the changing of perspectives, the amount of characters, the amount of historical detail that gets packed into something so short. I find the viewpoints don't reveal a lot about who the characters are. For example, sometimes the viewpoints change, and you literally have to figure out who the person is that's talking, along with figuring out what the fuck is even going on. So there's a lot that you have to do in 150 pages, or however long this is. 200 pages, alongside getting the themes of the book. So I found it really dense, but I also thought it was very good. I loved the characters. I loved the sister character. What was her name? Myrtle. I thought she was the best character. And Pompey Jones as well. He was a good character. And I thought some of the situations they get in are very wacky and strange. In terms of what it's saying about the Crimean War, I can't speak to that. I don't know anything about it. But I thought the book itself was very interesting and dense, and I would read it again. I'd give it like a 3 out of 5, I don't know. I find that one really hard to judge, but I mean, it would have been a good Booker winner, I'm sure, because there's a lot to unpack there, definitely. So those were the only books I read. I only read 4 books. In order, let's rank them. Why not? Fuck it, why not? In order, I'd rank them. The Emperor #1, of course. Then I'd say Beryl B. Bainbridge's Master Georgie. Then I'd say Heat and Dust. And then I'd probably say Pink Slime. So there we go. That's the order of the books I read. I only read 4. Let's hope I can boost that up next month, or this month, I suppose. The first poetry book I read was a book of poetry by Charles Simic called Jackstraws. Charles Simic might be my favorite poet. He was, I believe, Serbian. He was a Serbian-American, and he wrote very odd poetry where they're kind of like weird little idiosyncratic jokes, almost. So I don't have a copy of the one that I read this month, but I do have a copy of the one that he won the Pulitzer for, The World Doesn't End. And this, I mean, I love this. This is like my favorite thing ever. But what he does, they're kind of like prose poems. Some of them are prose poems, and they're mostly like, yeah, idiosyncratic little puzzle boxes about some certain theme. They're almost kind of like allegories or like little metaphors. It's hard to explain. Here's a good example. Here's one that I really love, that I always quote for some reason. I fucking love this. We were so poor I had to take the place of the bait in the mousetrap. All alone in the cellar I could hear them pacing upstairs, tossing and turning in their beds. These are dark and evil days, the mouse told me as he nibbled my ear. Years passed. My mother wore a cat fur collar, which she stroked until its sparks lit up the cellar. So, I don't know what any of that means, but it sounds good. And it is, again, an allegorical puzzle box about wealth and poverty that I love. And all of his poems have that kind of lens to them, where they're kind of jokes and they're kind of saying something significant. And Jackstraws is, again, the same thing. I don't know how to rate it. I just gave it a 5 out of 5. I fucking love him. And anytime I can get a hands on a book of poetry of his, I try to. So chances are there'll be another one of his in February as well that I'll review and recommend. But yeah, massive inspiration for me, that guy. And I think he died last year, so yeah, rest in peace to him. The next book of poetry I read was, I think it won the T.S. Eliot Prize this year. It was called Self-Portrait as Othello. I'll put a picture up of it. I didn't like it at all. I found it really calculated and insincere, and this is, I would love to talk about it with somebody for some purpose. I'd love to do a live stream and talk about it, although I can't think of a good reason why we would do that. But I found it really annoying. I thought the point of it was not explored very interestingly at all. I found any attempt at humor really forced and, again, really calculated, and I find it really hard to explain without having read it 5 minutes ago and having quotes to pull because I didn't write any quotes for it. But I found it, yeah, it was not something I enjoyed, but it was something where I understood why it was winning awards, but I did not connect with it at all. I get why people do, I guess, but yeah, self-portrait as Othello. Why am I finding it so hard to say? Yeah, I was not a fan, so I gave that a 2 out of 5, but, you know. I don't know, I'll read it again if I find myself in a position where I want to talk about it more. And the last thing I read was a lot of Louise Gluck poems. So I have her collected works. So this is, I think, literally everything she ever wrote, from her first collection till she got the Nobel Prize in 2020. And when she got the prize, I didn't really get why she won, and I was not interested in her poetry because, you know, I was what? How old was I? 19? 18? I was a dumb fuck, I didn't know. But now I really love her. I'm reading it chronologically. I haven't finished it, so I've read her collections. I've read Firstborn, I've read The House on Marshland, and I've read Descending Figure, and I think that's it. So I've read her first 3 collections so far. I thought that the last 2 of those were quite interchangeable in a way. I thought The House on Marshland was pretty good. It's considered her breakout. She wrote it when she was like 30, 32. Descending Figure she wrote about 5 years later. And I thought that was interesting. A lot of Greek reference in that one. And I thought Firstborn, which was her first collection, which she wrote when she was like 24, I thought that was absolutely fantastic. So out of the 3 I read, Firstborn is the one that I would recommend to people. And if you buy this collection, you should definitely start from the beginning because the poetry gets interesting as it goes on. You do see an evolution of the poet, which is odd, and it's something you never really see in one volume. Even if you're collecting poems, it's very hard to see a chronological evolution of a poet, but you definitely do with her. And her first collection, it's kind of about her fears of being a mother and of having a child, I think. And her, like, relationships at the time. And it's very raw, and it's very, straightforward, and it has a theme, and I loved Firstborn, the first collection. That's the one that really stuck with me. And the other 2 I found quite, sort of saying the same things, again, these nebulous perspectives on life, and I've read some of The Wild Iris, which is a later collection of hers. I think I have just read the whole thing, actually, and I felt the same thing about that. I was not getting anything out of it because I found it so, just kind of, like, broad in its messaging. But we'll see how I feel when I get to that in my just really literal reading of the poetry from front cover to back cover. But yeah, I like her as a poet. I think she's very interesting. It's very odd that she got the Nobel Prize. Some people think she got the Nobel Prize over Charles Simic, that they were considered in the same year. And if that was the case, then I would not have gone with her. I would have gone with someone else. I would have gone with Charles Simic. But Louise Gluck, I find it interesting that she won the Nobel Prize, and I'm looking forward to read more from her to understand better why she did. But until that point, yeah, Firstborn is the book of poetry of hers that I've read more than once. I keep going back and reading poems from it because I think they're so great. And it's absolutely depressing that she wrote that at the age of 24, 25. But I've still got 3 years until that's really depressing. Until I pass that age threshold. Until that point, I can maintain hope that I can ever write as good as that, but I don't think there's a chance, so yeah. Yep, so that's what I've read. Ignore my Goodreads, I never log anything correctly. I know that half of these, I think, still on my Goodreads say I'm still reading them, but no, I finished them in the last week or so, and I just can't be fucked to change that, so yeah, God bless, thank you all, bye!